There is something about betrayal that shakes a person to their very core. It isn't just the act itself, but the implication of it, the realization that trust was misplaced, that loyalty was an illusion, that the people who smiled at you, who spoke warmly, who assured you of their presence, were the same people sharpening knives behind your back. That is what breaks a person more than anything. It is the foundation of something much darker than pain. It is the dismantling of belief, the crumbling of security, and the shattering of what was once considered safe. And yet, if you look closely at the world, you will see a strange pattern emerging. The betrayers never seem to truly escape the consequences of their actions. They may think they do. They may even convince themselves that their deception was justified, that it was necessary, that it was smart, but life does not let such actions go unanswered. There is a weight to treachery, a kind of gravitational pull that drags the betrayer into a spiral of self-destruction, even if they are too blind to see it at first. Imagine a man who places all his trust in those around him. He is honest, hardworking, committed to his cause, dedicated to his relationships, and sincere in his efforts. He believes in loyalty, in integrity, in the virtue of standing by people even when things get difficult. And then one day he learns that the very people he trusted have been plotting against him, whispering behind his back, setting up traps in the shadows. He is left standing in the ruins of everything he built, wondering how such a thing could happen. He wrestles with rage, with sorrow, with disbelief. He questions his own judgment. Was he naive? Was he a fool for believing in the good of others? He plays every moment back in his mind, trying to spot the signs he missed, trying to understand how he let himself be deceived. The weight of the betrayal is unbearable, pressing down on his chest like an anchor, drowning him in its cruelty. But something remarkable happens. As he falls into darkness, as he withdraws from the world, something inside him begins to shift. He realizes that this pain is not the end of him, that this wound, though deep, is not fatal. He begins to see with clarity what he could not see before. He sees the manipulators for who they truly are. He understands their weaknesses, their patterns, their inevitable downfall. The betrayers, you see, do not escape. They think they do, but they do not, because betrayal is not a singular act. It is a way of being, a pathology, a sickness that eats away at the soul. The person who betrays once will betray again, and again, and again. They become trapped in a cycle of their own making. They learn to lie, to deceive, to manipulate. Thus, while betrayal may destroy trust in others, it does not have to destroy the individual. Instead, it can serve as the catalyst for transformation, leading to a state of strength that the betrayer themselves will never understand. Because while the betrayed grows stronger through their suffering, the betrayer is often left to rot in their own isolation, trapped in a world where their own treachery is the very thing that keeps them alone. The two, those who betray others eventually face their own downfall, as deception creates a cycle of self-destruction. Betrayal is not a singular event, nor is it something that exists in isolation. It is a pattern, a habit, a mindset that gradually consumes the betrayer from within. When a person deceives others, they might feel a fleeting sense of power, a momentary surge of control over those they have misled. But what they fail to realize is that every lie, every manipulation, every act of treachery sets the stage for their own downfall. Betrayal, by its nature, severs bonds. It destroys trust, but it also isolates the betrayer. The person who deceives believes they are outmaneuvering others, that they are playing some higher level game of strategy. But what they are truly doing is burning every bridge that could have led them to real security, genuine relationships, and meaningful alliances. Instead of walking a path of honesty and integrity, they carve out a road lined with enemies, with those who, once they learn the truth, will turn against them without hesitation. A betrayer operates under the illusion that they are in control. They manipulate situations, weave lies into narratives that benefit them, and pretend to be someone they are not. Yet, deception is a fragile construct. Lies, once told, demand more lies to sustain them. A single thread of dishonesty, once pulled, can unravel an entire existence built on manipulation. Eventually, contradictions arise. People talk, secrets slip, and before the betrayer realizes it, their carefully crafted world begins to crumble beneath them. There is a kind of paranoia that haunts those who betray. They know what they have done, they know what they are capable of, and because of that, they assume that others are just as deceptive as they are. They begin to see betrayal everywhere. They trust no one. They suspect everyone. They live in a state of heightened anxiety, always looking over their shoulder, always wondering when their turn will come. Because deep down they understand one unshakable truth. What they have done to others will eventually be done to them. The downfall of a betrayer is not always immediate. Sometimes they seem to thrive for a while. They accumulate power, wealth, influence. They move through life appearing untouched by the consequences of their actions. But this is an illusion. Every act of betrayal chips away at their foundation. Relationships built on lies do not last. Trust, once broken, cannot be truly restored. And so, as time progresses, the betrayer finds themselves alone, surrounded not by loyal friends, but by people just like them. Individuals who are only there as long as they have something to gain. And when the betrayer stumbles, when their power begins to wane, those very people will be the first to turn against them. Consider a person who consistently manipulates those around them for personal gain. At first they succeed. They convince people to believe in them, to follow them, to trust them. But deception is unsustainable. Eventually, the people they have deceived begin to connect the dots. They start to see the patterns, the inconsistencies, the gaps in the stories they have been told. And when that happens, the betrayer finds themselves exposed, stripped of the illusion they once wielded as a weapon. And when that moment comes, there is no redemption, there is no forgiveness waiting for them. Because betrayal is remembered. People do not forget being lied to, being used, being treated as disposable. The betrayer, in their arrogance, never accounted for the day when the world would turn against them. But it always does. Every deception sows the seeds of its own destruction, and eventually those seeds bear fruit. The person who betrays will always face consequences, not necessarily in the way they expect, but in ways that are inescapable. They might lose their credibility, they might lose their allies, they might wake up one day and realize that they have no one left who genuinely cares about them, because at the core of betrayal is selfishness. And selfish people do not inspire loyalty. They might win battles, but they will lose the war. They might achieve temporary success, but they will never know peace. And in the end, the betrayer is left alone, haunted by the very deception they thought would set them free. 3. The betrayed person gains clarity, resilience, and the ability to recognize manipulation, ultimately emerging stronger. Betrayal is a devastating experience, yet within its destruction lies an opportunity for transformation. When someone is betrayed, they are initially overwhelmed by pain, confusion, and a sense of loss. They may spend days, weeks, even years questioning why it happened, replaying conversations, looking for signs they missed. They might blame themselves, thinking they should have seen it coming, that they were foolish to trust so easily. But over time, something remarkable happens. The pain begins to sharpen their perception. They start to see the world in a different light, no longer blinded by naivety, but instead armed with a deeper understanding of human nature. Clarity emerges when the illusions shatter. Before the betrayal, they may have held an idealized version of people, believing that honesty and loyalty were universal values. But betrayal forces them to confront the harsh truth. Some people do not operate with integrity. Some seek to manipulate and deceive, and others prioritize their selfish interest over bonds of trust. This realization is painful, but it is also empowering. It allows the betrayed to move forward with a newfound awareness, to see through false pretenses and to identify warning signs they once ignored. Resilience follows clarity. Once a person has been deeply wounded and survived, they realize they are stronger than they once believed. The pain of betrayal, though crippling at first, eventually becomes fuel for personal growth. They learn that they do not need external validation, that their worth is not defined by the approval or actions of others. They rebuild themselves from the inside out, becoming independent and self-sufficient in ways they never imagined. They stop seeking acceptance from those who never truly valued them in the first place. This resilience is what makes them untouchable. They may have been broken, but they are no longer fragile. Every hardship they endured has forged them into someone unshakable. But perhaps the most significant transformation is the ability to recognize manipulation. Before the betrayal, they may have been blind to subtle forms of deception. Dishonest words, insincere flattery, hidden agendas. But now they have developed an acute sense of discernment. They can detect dishonesty in tone, body language, and intent. They no longer take words at face value, but assess actions and consistency. They become less susceptible to false promises and manipulative tactics. Their experience has granted them an invaluable skill, the ability to see through deception before it has a chance to take root. Ultimately, they emerge stronger, not because betrayal did not harm them, but because they learned to use that harm to build a stronger version of themselves. The pain they endured became the fire that tempered them, shaping them into individuals who no longer fear deception, but instead navigate the world with wisdom and confidence. They do not allow bitterness to consume them, nor do they seek revenge, for they understand that the greatest triumph over betrayal is to rise above it, unbroken and unstoppable. Betrayers live in constant anxiety, unable to trust or build meaningful relationships, which leads to their isolation. The act of betrayal may offer an immediate advantage, a fleeting sense of superiority, or even material gains, but it plants a seed of perpetual unrest within the betrayer. When a person deceives another, they sever the very foundation that allows for genuine connection. Trust, once broken, is rarely restored, and the betrayer finds themselves locked in a cycle of their own making, a world where no one truly believes in them, and where they, in turn, believe in no one. An individual who engages in betrayal knows, consciously or unconsciously, that their actions have consequences, even if they momentarily justify their deception. Deep within their psyche lingers the awareness that their dishonest nature can be mirrored back at them at any moment. This breeds an inescapable paranoia. They become hypervigilant, constantly wondering if those around them are plotting against them, just as they have done to others. This kind of existence is exhausting. There is no peace, no ability to relax in the presence of others, because in the betrayer's mind, everyone operates by the same treacherous code they themselves abide by. The irony is that betrayers often convince themselves that their actions make them more powerful or untouchable, but the opposite is true. They become prisoners of their own deception. Every relationship they form is tainted with suspicion. They question the loyalty of others because they know better than anyone how easily loyalty can be faked. This isolates them, not just socially, but emotionally. They are unable to experience the depth of human connection that comes with genuine trust and mutual respect. Over time, this creates a profound loneliness, one that no amount of wealth, power, or external validation can fill. Even if they surround themselves with people, those relationships are often transactional. They are not built on authenticity, but on convenience and self-interest. The betrayer may think they have built a network of allies, but in reality, they are merely in the company of others who share the same selfish tendencies. The moment their power or influence wavers, these so-called allies vanish, leaving them exposed and vulnerable. And because they have built their entire existence on manipulation, they have no one to turn to when the inevitable collapse begins. Isolation is not merely a lack of companionship. It is the absence of meaningful bonds, of knowing that someone truly understands and accepts you for who you are. A betrayer, in their quest to manipulate and control, forfeits the possibility of ever experiencing that depth of connection. They may wear a mask of confidence, but inside, they are tormented by their own inability to trust and be trusted. Every lie told, every act of deception, every relationship built on pretense further deepens their emotional detachment from the world. And this is where the true punishment of betrayal lies, not in external retribution, but in the slow, suffocating realization that they have alienated themselves from everything that makes life meaningful. The betrayer may outwardly succeed for a time, but they are internally crumbling. They cannot confide in anyone, cannot truly share their fears, cannot find solace in another's presence. They have created a world where they are always on edge, always calculating, always fearful of the day when their own methods are used against them. In the end, they are left with nothing but themselves and the consequences of their choices. The pain they inflict on others finds its way back to them, not through vengeance, but through the unbearable weight of loneliness, distrust, and regret. And that, perhaps, is a far greater punishment than any external consequence could ever be. 5. Justice is inevitable. Betrayal is an act against oneself, and those who deceive others will ultimately be consumed by their own lies. The night was still, yet something in the air felt unsettled. A storm was coming, not of wind and rain, but of consequence. Betrayal is a quiet poison, creeping through the veins of trust until it turns to dust. And somewhere, in the silence of the dark, the weight of treachery was beginning to press upon those who had played their wicked games. There was a man who gave his heart without hesitation. He had stood by them, shielded them, believed in their whispered words of loyalty. He had built his world on the foundation of shared bonds, only to wake one day and find cracks splitting through the very ground he stood upon. Their voices, once filled with warmth, were now laced with deceit. Their hands, once extended in friendship, had woven a web meant to trap him in ruin. The realization came like the first strike of thunder, sharp and undeniable. They had betrayed him, not once, not by accident, but with careful calculation. Every laugh they shared, every secret he had confided, every sacrifice he made had been taken for granted. His kindness was mistaken for weakness, his patience for naivety. And so they conspired against him, thinking he would never see the daggers they held behind their backs. But fate has a way of balancing the scales. As he sat in the dim glow of the night, the bitterness of betrayal burned in his chest. He could have sought revenge, could have raged against them, but he did not need to, because unseen forces move in ways no human mind can comprehend. The hands of justice do not always strike with a sword. Sometimes they let evil consume itself. And so it began. One by one, the ones who betrayed him began to feel the weight of their own darkness. It started subtly, as all punishments do. Their lies, once seamlessly spun, started to unravel. The trust they had taken from others was no longer granted to them. Whispers of suspicion followed their footsteps, and the same cunning that had led them to betray now led them into ruin. One lost everything they had stolen, as if the very ground beneath them refused to hold on to what was gained through deceit. Their wealth, their possessions, all slipped through their fingers like sand in a storm. Another found themselves trapped in their own web of lies where no one believed a word they spoke. The doors they had once walked through so easily were now closed, locked by the same manipulation they had used against others. The allies they once had turned their backs, mirroring the very betrayal they had inflicted. And the worst among them, the one who had orchestrated it all, they were not struck down by an external force, but by the shadows they had ignored. For evil does not play favorites. It uses those who summon it, and then devours them whole. They thought they were untouchable, that their deception would elevate them. But the darkness they had called upon was waiting, watching, patient as the night. It took its time, letting them believe they had won, letting them taste the victory they had stolen. And then, when they were at their highest, it reached for them. It was not a loud punishment, not a dramatic downfall, but a slow and merciless descent into despair. The man who had been betrayed did not need to lift a finger. He did not need to speak a word. He simply lived, walking forward, untouched by the ruin that followed in the footsteps of those who had wronged him. He did not gloat, did not celebrate, for he knew that justice does not need an audience. It simply happens, in its own time, in its own way. And as the storm finally broke, as the last of them fell, he stood beneath the sky, cleansed by the rain. Because they had betrayed him, but evil had been waiting for them all along. The realization came like the first strike of thunder, sharp and undeniable. They had betrayed him, not once, not by accident, but with careful calculation. Every laugh they shared, every secret he had confided, every sacrifice he made had been taken for granted. His kindness was mistaken for weakness, his patience for naivety. And so they conspired against him, thinking he would never see the daggers they held behind their backs. But fate has a way of balancing the scales. As he sat in the dim glow of the night, the bitterness of betrayal burned in his chest. He could have sought revenge, could have raged against them, but he did not need to, because unseen forces move in ways no human mind can comprehend. The hands of justice do not always strike with a sword. Sometimes they let evil consume itself. And so it began. One by one, the ones who betrayed him began to feel the weight of their own darkness. It started subtly, as all punishments do. Their lies, once seamlessly spun, started to unravel. The trust they had taken from others was no longer granted to them. Whispers of suspicion followed their footsteps, and the same cunning that had led them to betray now led them into ruin. One lost everything they had stolen, as if the very ground beneath them refused to hold on to what was gained through deceit. Their wealth, their possessions, all slipped through their fingers like sand in a storm. Another found themselves trapped in their own web of lies, where no one believed a word they spoke. The doors they had once walked through so easily were now closed, locked by the same manipulation they had used against others. The allies they once had turned their backs, mirroring the very betrayal they had inflicted. And the worst among them, the one who had orchestrated it all, they were not struck down by an external force, but by the shadows they had ignored. For evil does not play favorites. It uses those who summon it and then devours them whole. They thought they were untouchable, that their deception would elevate them, but the darkness they had called upon was waiting, watching, patient as the night. It took its time, letting them believe they had won, letting them taste the victory they had stolen. And then, when they were at their highest, it reached for them. It was not a loud punishment, not a dramatic downfall, but a slow and merciless descent into despair. The man who had been betrayed did not need to lift a finger. He did not need to speak a word. He simply lived, walking forward, untouched by the ruin that followed in the footsteps of those who had wronged him. He did not gloat, did not celebrate, for he knew that justice does not need an audience. It simply happens in its own time, in its own way. The man who had been betrayed did not need to lift a finger. He did not need to speak a word. He simply lived, walking forward, untouched by the ruin that followed, in the footsteps of those who had wronged him. He did not gloat, did not celebrate, for he knew that justice does not need an audience. It simply happens, in its own time, in its own way. And as the storm finally broke, as the last of them fell, he stood beneath the sky, cleansed by the rain. Because they had betrayed him, but evil had been waiting for them all along. Justice has a way of working in silence. It does not need a stage, nor does it require applause. It moves like an unseen force, setting things right in ways no human hand can orchestrate. Betrayal may wound deeply, but it is never without consequence. Those who weave deception often forget that the very threads they spin will one day tighten around them. For the man who endured the treachery, there was no need for vengeance. He understood that time itself is a great equalizer, that every action casts a shadow that will one day return to its maker. He walked away, knowing that those who had wronged him were now prisoners of their own misdeeds. In the quiet aftermath, when the echoes of their downfall settled, he found peace, not in their suffering, but in his own liberation. For no weight is heavier than the burden of hatred, and no victory is greater than moving forward, unchained. Evil had been waiting for them, but his path was clear. He stepped into the dawn, leaving behind only the remnants of a story that had already written its own ending. The betrayal you have faced is not hidden from God. Every tear, every wound, every silent cry in the dead of night, He has witnessed it all. You may feel that justice is delayed, but never mistake delay for denial. God is patient, and in His infinite wisdom, He allows the wicked to believe they are escaping their fate. But the trap is already set. Their own actions are building the walls of their downfall, and when the time is right, their evil will return upon them tenfold. Many people believe they can escape the consequences of their actions, that their betrayal will be forgotten with time. But time does not erase justice. It delivers it. The ones who deceived you, who hurt you without remorse, may seem to be thriving. They may walk with confidence, laughing as if they have won. But every betrayal plants a seed of destruction that will sprout at the appointed hour. The moment they least expect it, the moment they believe they are safe, God will unveil their punishment, and it will not be subtle. It will be a lesson so severe that they will never forget it. Do not be deceived by the illusion of temporary success. The betrayers may sit at high tables today, but their throne is crumbling beneath them. Every dishonest gain, every manipulative scheme, every lie spoken with a smile, they are all being recorded in the book of consequences. And when the pages turn to their judgment, they will plead for mercy, but the same mercy they denied you will be denied to them. God does not operate by human timelines. You may wonder, why hasn't their downfall come yet? But justice is not about speed, it is about precision. God waits for the perfect moment. He waits until their pride is at its peak, until they have convinced themselves that their sins have no consequence. And then, just as they bask in their false security, He strikes. He does not merely expose them, He humbles them, strips them, and makes them face the weight of their own evil. Remember the stories of old. Pharaoh believed he was invincible, that his cruelty would never meet resistance. He enslaved, tormented, and took pleasure in the suffering of others. But God was not blind to the cries of the oppressed. He waited, allowing Pharaoh to seal his own fate with his arrogance. And when the time came, God sent plagues, destruction, and ultimately a mighty fall that echoed through history. So too will the betrayers of today face their reckoning. You must not carry the weight of vengeance. The burden of justice belongs to God alone. If you chase revenge, you lower yourself to their level. But when you step back, when you trust in divine justice, you free yourself from the chains of their betrayal. You walk forward in peace, knowing that the hand of God is mightier than any scheme of man. Those who betrayed you may try to outrun their fate, but they cannot outrun the eyes of the Almighty. He sees all, He knows all, and He acts with perfect judgment. Their suffering will come in ways they never anticipated. Some will be betrayed by the very people they trusted most. Others will watch everything they built collapse in their hands. Their names, once spoken with admiration, will become a curse. They will seek comfort and